Hi everyone and welcome to ADD بالعربي. Today's guest is Dulce Torres. She's a licensed professional counselor, supervisor, and she's an ADHD coach. She's also the CEO for Avant Counseling Center. Hi Dulce, and I'm so excited to have you finally here.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for inviting me.
So Dulce has a very exciting news. Do you want to share us with that?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for letting me share that I was announced at top 60 remote ADHD coaches in the US. And this was selected by SOARS, which is a summer camp and boarding school for adolescents and young adults. And
Yay!
Research, and I love that. Hey.
That is so exciting.
Yes, it is.
Yes. So I have some questions for you about ADHD and ADHD coaching and some specific questions about how to deal with ADHD. So let's start. How do you get accurate diagnosis for ADHD?
This is a really good question, Sarah, because I believe that there is a lot of different opinions about how to get a diagnosis. So if I go to the simplistic way, basic, it is a clinical interview with a professional who understands ADHD and can provide this diagnosis. Could be a psychologist, a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed professional counselor, a neurologist. Anyone who has experience and is a licensed person can diagnose in the US. However, best practice is the key here. And you want to make sure you go to a person that will do more than just a clinical interview, because you want to have clinical skills that the person can compare about how others see you, how do you see yourself. You want them to gather
What do you mean by clinical skills?
Oh, great question. Clinical skills are tools that are completed by the individual, could be electronically or paper, which is basically a questionnaires. These are questionnaires that they have to answer questions, and they have a scale to how to choose the best responses. And the intention is to see how the person sees themselves. And then we want other people to complete them, people who knows that individual. It could be a spouse, a parent, a teacher, that can give us also their perspective of these individuals. Because what we want to do is to compare both of those scales and see what are they saying about these individuals. And you want to get individuals who knows you from your childhood and things like that. Like a parent is important, or a good historian. And by historian, it could be a spouse who knows the history and knows the information about their husbands, or wives. So you want to, because you want to know that the symptoms of ADHD, they were noticeable before age 12. So
before 12?
Before age 12. So you want to gather, and it's going to look very different, and it's going to present also very different for an adult today. So maybe I have been very successful for those individuals diagnosed as adults, but I did have some struggles, but because I'm very intelligent and because I learned some strategies, I was able to get by. But sometimes when you're adult in the workforce or something like that, or in a marriage, in a relationship, the symptoms reappear again. And then that's what you want a person who understands ADHD to give you an accurate diagnosis.
Okay. So he have to be specialized or familiar with ADHD, not everyone.
Not everyone. That is correct. You really want someone who understands ADHD, because ADHD symptoms can mimic many different things. It can also be confused by, a person that could have an anxiety disorder, or a person who has a learning disability. And people could have other disorders that people have to understand really well. ADHD and feel comfortable to know, okay, this is the diagnosis, and have data to support that.
Okay.
Now, let's not forget, I want to add a piece in here. A lot of people want to know their cognitive abilities or an IQ. And that's when sometimes they go in depth into this evaluation. They really go to a psychologist who can do a full batter of testing to not only look at the ADHD component. It's very important to look at their executive functioning. And important to know, is there other challenges like learning differences and learning disabilities?
Okay, so this leads me to another question. Is ADHD comorbidity?
So every person, well, let me start different. Comorbidities is what I call coexisting conditions, because that may be a lot easier for people to understand. Coexisting conditions is like when you have, maybe you have diabetes and high blood pressure, you know, so with ADHD, you can have anxiety, you can have depression, you can have learning disabilities, dyslexia, dyscalculia, you can have autism will be in the spectrum. You can have any other symptoms or disorders. So that's what coexisting means. Now, every person with ADHD, I will tell you that there are a high percentage of individuals who have a coexisting condition or comorbidity. So it's important to know what is that, in case that when you're looking for strategies, like I said, that a person has a learning disability in math and reading. Well, we know that attention issues are going to make it more difficult for them, but they need a specific strategies for the math or for the reading. It's not just strategies to manage their ADHD. Okay, so it's important to know, as well as anxiety and depression. You know, and you need to understand how you work with that. But that's what we mean with coexisting conditions. And it's important to be very educated and understand that there's a high percentage, I believe it's more than 60% of individuals with ADHD will have another coexisting condition.
Wow, that's huge. I like how Jessica McCabe from How to ADHD, she called it ADHD always come with friend.
I love that. Yes, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it's make it more simple and clear. So how to choose a good counselor or a good coach? So,
excuse me. I always said, because I provide both services, I'm a licensed counselor and I am a certified ADHD coach. When people call me, a lot of individuals want to jump immediately to coaching. And I get it. I understand that. However, it is important to go to a person who really, really understands, again, ADHD. I have to admit that many counselors will announce that they do ADHD. It's one of the diagnoses on the DSM-5. So they put a whole list of things they do, and they choose ADHD in that list. When that happens, in my experience, so I'm going to talk about me and my experience with my client is, everyone comes to me and said, yes, I see another counselor, and yes, it has helped, but they do not understand my ADHD piece.
Even the counselor, that's an important point.
Yes.
Not every counselor, not every coach, not every psychologist will understand ADHD.
That is correct. So you really want to go to someone who's specialized. You really want to interview your counselors. I tell them, all 2 or 3 counselors, talk to them.
How to interview a counselor?
Oh, believe me, I get families to call me. That happens to me, and I always say to them, I'm so impressed that you're doing this, and I like you doing it. Keep interviewing your counselors, and then choose the best that sounds to you. You can connect. And you know, they understand my challenge, they understand me.
So how my question is, how to interview a counselor? Like I have to go ask him, have you ever dealt with people with ADHD? What type of questions? Give me 3 questions.
I will start with, you know, what is your understanding about ADHD? Just a general question like that. the individual, let's be clear that many individuals don't understand their ADHD themselves too well. So they want to have some knowledge about their ADHD and what are executive functions. And that's really important, because this is my take. All counselors can understand ADHD. They understand what the diagnosis is in general, and they can tell you what is the criteria. You know, inability to focus, hyperactive, impulsivity, you know, they understand the criteria. But then what we work for and help the individual is not just those symptoms, it's about the executive function. So if you have a counselor that tells you about the criteria and everything and never mentions you executive functions, never explain to you how those executive functions affects the brain, that for me is a red flag.
Oh, okay. So what is executive function? Like the ability to memorize? What else?
Well, executive functions are our mental skills. We all have them. This is something normal. I don't want to say that another diagnosis. That is something that all of us individuals have, our executive functions. They're located in the prefrontal cortex. And basically this is the ability, our mental skills, the ability for us to think, okay, so I am going now to get up in the morning. So I activate my brain. I'm ability to focus. I'm ability to understand what I need to do next. Ability to manage my time, to manage any kind of emotions. So there are a lot of executive functions. And it's to understand that the person with ADHD is going to have deficits in executive functions. And when I deficits is weaknesses, because those also can be, we have strengths in executive functions as well.
So the counselor have to be familiar with ADHD, not only the symptoms and signs and the comorbidities, you have to be familiar with the executive function itself.
Yes.